This video is brought to you by these awesome Christmas ornaments. Those in the US get priority shipping with ornaments that reach them in about 2 to 3 days. So order today to have an epic Christmas tree this year. Link in the comment section and video description down below. While this is Westerlands Part 4, it can be watched without seeing Parts 1 through 3. In the other parts, I talked about the first Lannister, their growing power, the Andals invading their land, and then the Targaryens invading Westeros, forcing the Lannisters to bend the knee and give up their title King of the Rock and become simple Wardens of the West. This video, I want to talk about the Lannisters under the control of the Targaryens. Though the Targaryens allowed them to keep their wealth, at first the Lannisters weren't that close to the Targaryens. The Lyons had no blood relation and too much pride to throw themselves at the Targaryens' feet to win favor and power at court. Cough tullies. Besides the king's royal progresses throughout Aegon I and his son Aenys II's reign on the Iron Throne, the Lannisters and the Westerlands wouldn't have much interaction with the Targaryens. That changed when Maegor I became the third Targaryen king when his brother died and he stole the Iron Throne from his nephew Aegon. Though the Lannisters didn't outright challenge Maegor and demand he give the crown to his rightful nephew, because people quickly lost their life for doing that, instead, House Lannister gave protection. When Prince Aegon and his sister wife Rhaena were seeking shelter from their cruel uncle, Lord Lyman Lannister allowed them to stay in his home, extending guest right to them and refusing all of King Maegor's demands to hand them over. Which was brave in itself because Maegor was definitely a loose cannon. Despite keeping Aegon and his wife safe under his roof, Lyman didn't give any of his men to Aegon to fight his uncle. There are some thoughts on why that is, but it would be speculation at best. However, Lord Lannister finally went to action after Prince Aegon, rallying an army, attempted to defeat his uncle, but was instead killed by him at the battle beneath the God's Eye. After the young prince's death, Aegon's youngest brother, Jaehaerys, put a claim for the throne, and finally House Lannister decided to support Aenys' children. This worked out great for House Lannister and the Westerlands, as once Maegor was finally dead and Jaehaerys put on the Iron Throne, House Lannister finally had closer ties to the Targaryens for aiding them. However, the Maesters note that the Baratheons, Tullys, Hightowers, Velaryons, and Arryns still surpassed them in influence. But still, they were closer to the royal house than they had been before, so that's progress. All would be mostly quiet for the Lannisters until the Great Council of 101 AC. This council was called when King Jaehaerys' heirs all died for one reason or another, and a new heir needed to be decided. Instead of having King Jaehaerys do it, lords from all over the realm came to Harrenhal to settle who would sit on the throne next. It came down to 2 candidates: Viserys, eldest son of Prince Baelon, who had once been Jaehaerys' son and heir before his death, and Lennar Velaryon, son of Princess Rhaenys, who was Aemon's daughter and passed over as a possibility. And if you're losing track of who's related how to what, the Targaryens just love to interbreed and love to use the same names over and over and over. So I have a family tree up. You gotta love those crazy Targaryens, and if you get confused, just look at the family tree. How many Aegons do you need in one family? So back to the Lannisters. Lord Tywin Lannister attended this great council to help decide the succession. Being our lovable, power-hungry Lannisters, they, famously might I add, showed up with 300 bannermen, men-at-arms, and servants. But they got showed up when Lord Tyrell came with 500 in his party, so A for effort. Lord Lannister chose to stand behind Prince Viserys, which turned out to be a great decision, as he was eventually chosen to rule after King Jaehaerys. When Viserys I ascended to the Iron Throne, he remembered that the Lannisters had backed him and rewarded them for their loyalty. King Viserys I made Lord Jason Lannister's twin brother, Sir Tylan, the Master of Ships, which eventually led to Sir Tylan becoming the Master of Coin for King Aegon II. While a great honor, this unfortunately was a good thing and a bad thing for the Lannisters and the Westerlands. Becoming closer to House Targaryen was great, until the Dance of the Dragons broke out. The war began in 129 AC, when there was a war of succession between Aegon II and his half-sister Rhaenyra over Viserys' throne. Sir Tylan's close relationship with the Iron Throne and favored position brought his brother Lord Jason into this war on Aegon II's side. While many suffered in this realm from this horrible conflict, the Lannisters especially took a blow or two. Sir Jason marched east to fight for Aegon II, but was killed in the battle to Rhaenyra and her forces at the crossing of the Red Fork. Not something the Lannisters like to talk about, but Lord Jason was actually killed by a squire named Pate of Longleaf, who was then knighted after the battle and further called Lion Slayer, which is just ouch. Despite the loss of their lord, the Westerlands fought on. The Westermen marched and won victories under Sir Adrian Tarbeck, then under Lord Lefford before he perished at the fish feed. His Westermen were also slaughtered. To make matters worse, when Sir Jason was away fighting and then dying, the Ironborn had to be the typical assholes they are. The Red Kraken and his reavers fell on the Westerlands that were mostly undefended, ravaging the area. Luckily, Sir Jason had married a Bamf, and his wife, Lady Johanna, barred the gates of Casterly Rock, keeping the Ironborn out. That didn't stop the Ironborn from attacking the rest of the Westerlands, though. The Red Kraken burned the House Lannister fleet and sacked Lannisport. They took grain, trade goods, gold, and hundreds of women and girls to become salt wives. And I'm sure Lady Lannister was also incredibly sad that her husband's favorite mistress and their daughters were also taken by the Ironborn. The Ironborn moved on to take Case and Fair Isle, where the Red Kraken claimed 4 of Lord Farman's daughters as salt wives, and was very charitable in giving the 5th and homely one to his brother, Ferran. This all has a sorta happy ending though. In Fair Castle, the Red Kraken's throat was slit with his own dagger by a girl named Tess, who then threw herself in the ocean afterwards, but that's okay. What's important is within hours, Fair Isle was free of the Ironborn once again. However, let's go back to the Dance of the Dragons. Poor Sir Tylan would also suffer for his relationship with Aegon II during this war. Being the master of coins and loyal to Aegon II, before Rhaenyra took King's Landing, he had hidden the greater part of the crown's gold. When she finally took King's Landing and Tylan his prisoner, she tortured him cruelly. She blinded him, she gelded him, she mutilated him, and still, he refused to talk, refused to tell her where the crown's wealth was hidden. And if you're thinking he sounds badass, it gets better. When Aegon II took the city back, they found the mutilated Lannister. His wits were completely intact despite what had been done to him. So Aegon II kept him as master of coin, and in his last days of rule, even trusted Tylan enough to send him to the Free Cities in search of sellswords to fight against Rhaenyra's son, Aegon. In the end, that really didn't matter, as Aegon II was poisoned and Aegon III came to the throne. He was 11, so a regency was needed, and Tylan Lannister was decided to be his hand to the king. Some maesters speculate that not only was it to help heal wounds, but his enemies thought a blind maimed man to be no threat to them. But Tylan continued to be amazing. He served wonderfully for 2 years before dying of the winter fever in 133 AC. The Lannisters are made of some tough stuff. Now, remember Lord Jason's widow, Lady Johanna? A year later, in 134 AC, that kick-ass widow would sail to the Iron Islands with the Lord Admiral of the Reach, Sir Leo Costaigne, and wreck their shit, including taking one of Dalton's salt sons, removing his manhood, and making him a fool at Casterly Rock. She also lent money to King's Landing to rebuild after the war. The Lannisters, and by extension the Westerlands, continued to support the Targaryens over the years. When Daemon Blackfyre, bastard son of Aegon IV, decided he should have the throne, not his firstborn half-brother, the First Blackfyre Rebellion began in 196 AC. But supporting the Targaryens again caused more strife for House Lannister. Daemon Blackfyre and his rebels won some victories in the Westerlands, including heavily hitting Lannisport and the Golden Tooth. Sir Quentin Ball was particularly a thorn in the Westerlands and Lannister's side when he killed Lord Lefford and then sent Lord Daemon Lannister, later to be known as the Grey Lion, into retreat. Thankfully, in about a year, the First Blackfyre Rebellion was put down and Daemon Blackfyre was killed. After Lord Daemon died in 210 AC, the Westerlands saw his son, Tybalt, to succeed him as the new Lord of Casterly Rock. But someone had their hand in the poison jar. He died after ruling for only 2 years, and he only left behind a 3-year-old daughter, Cyril, as an heir. Given her young, tender age, Tybalt's brother, the child's uncle, Gerald, served as regent for the girl. However, tragedy struck again, and the Lady of Casterly Rock, the poor tender 3-year-old, died suddenly, as nieces of power-hungry uncles tend to do. This meant the Westerlands, the Rock, and all the wealth and power of House Lannister now passed to Lord Gerald. I'm sure he was completely shocked by this development. But hey, even though he probably killed his brother and little niece, the guy was still a great warden of the West. He was clever, shrewd, able, and fair-minded. Yeah, people gossiped that he killed his niece and brother, but under his rule for 31 years, the Westerlands and House Lannister increased immensely in wealth, power, and trade. He was such a great ruler, he became known as Gerald the Golden. But given the time and belief that the gods will always punish you for kinslaying, some bad things happened in his life that made people sure he had actually murdered his family members. First, in 230 AC, his much-loved second wife, Lady Rohan, disappeared under mysterious circumstances, less than a year after giving birth to his fourth son, Jason. The Peak Uprising, which saw the death of King Maekar Targaryen, also hurt the Westerlands, causing dire effects during Gerald's time as Lord of Casterly Rock. In 233 AC, the Lannisters fought to end the Peak Rebellion, and Lord Gerald lost the eldest of his twin sons, Tywald, while he squired for Lord Robert Reyne of Castamere. Lord Robert also died, leaving his eldest son, Sir Roger Reyne, the Red Lion, as his heir. Tywald had been betrothed to the Red Lion's young sister, Lady Ellen. Lady Ellen was a spirited young woman, strong-willed, hot-tempered, and had been dreaming of becoming Lady of Casterly Rock. With Gerald's heir and her betrothed dead, that dream seemed to be dying, but she would have none of that. Instead, she persuaded his twin brother, Tywin, the new heir of Casterly Rock, to rid of his own betrothal to the daughter of Lord Rowan of Golden Grove, and instead marry her. By the time this happened, Lord Gerald was too old, too full of grief and illness, and was but a pale shadow of his former self. He opposed the match, but eventually he gave way, and in 235 AC, there was a double wedding at Casterly Rock. Ellen Reyne was married to Sir Tywin, and his younger brother Tytos was wed to Jane Marbrand, the daughter of Lord Alan Marbrand of Ashmark. After the wedding, Ellen became Lady of Casterly Rock in all but name. Lord Gerald was too old, and being twice the widower, he chose not to remarry. The Grey Lion stayed in his bedchamber and read his books, while the new Lady of Casterly Rock held splendid court, held many magnificent tourney and balls, and filled the rock with musicians, mummers, artists, and of course, her own family, the Reynes. Having the power she always craved meant she could pass it on to her own family, and her brothers Roger and Renard were always close by as honors, lands, and offices were showered on them and their cousins, nephews, uncles, and nieces. It grew so bad that the aged fool of Lord Gerald, called Lord Toad, was heard to have said, "Lady Ellen must surely be a sorceress, for she has made it rain inside the rock all year." But in time this would change. In 236 AC, the Fourth Blackfire Rebellion began. If you're wondering about the Second Blackfire Rebellion, it was a total flop, but I have a really old video on it that I'll link below. If you're wondering about the Third Blackfire Rebellion, it was a bit more fun, but not really important for the Westerlands. Also, I'll have a link for that in the comment section below. So that Fourth Blackfire Rebellion was led by the pretender Daemon Blackfire III. Daemon crossed the Narrow Sea and landed at Massey Hook with Bittersteel and the Golden Company at his back. He was sure he would take the Iron Throne. King Aegon V, affectionately known as Egg, summoned his lords, including Lord Lannister and the Westerlands, to oppose Daemon III. The rebellion ended quickly at the Battle of Wendwater Bridge, with Daemon losing many and the Royalists losing fewer than 100 men. However, Tywin Lannister, heir of Casterly Rock and the second of Gerald's twins, was killed in battle. For whatever reason, this didn't plunge the Grey Lion further into grief, but instead put a fire in him. Tywin's body was laid to rest in Casterly Rock, and Sir Gerald took firm control of the Westerlands and did his best to prepare his third-born son, Tytos, a weak-willed and unpromising child, to succeed him. In doing this, he first set out to end the reign of the Reynes, making Lady Ellen's brothers leave Casterly Rock along with many other of her family. Though Lady Ellen stayed at Casterly Rock, her power faded, and the power of Lord Tytos' wife, Jane, only grew. Of course, Lady Ellen, who only ever wanted to be Lady of Casterly Rock, was in a tizzy that her husband had died, and his younger brother Tytos was now the heir. That meant Lady Jane would one day be Lady of Casterly Rock officially, and she was not okay with that. A bitter rivalry began between the two women. Lady Ellen was so desperate to be Lady of Casterly Rock that in 239 AC, she tried to sleep with Tytos, urging him to cast aside his wife and marry her instead. Tytos, as you will learn in part 5, was just a total wimp. He was 19 and found Lady Ellen to be so intimidating, he couldn't get it up, and this led the humiliated man to run back to his wife and confess what had happened and beg for her forgiveness. Lady Jane was forgiving, letting go what her young husband had done, but she did inform Lord Gerald of what had happened. Gerald was furious and wanted to be done with Lady Ellen for good, so he found her a new husband, sending ravens and making a quick match. Within a fortnight, Ellen was married to a red-faced Waldron Tarbeck, Lord of Tarbeck Hall, a 55-year-old widowed lord of an honorable, ancient, and impoverished house. Lady Ellen left Casterly Rock with Lord Tarbeck to never return. However, the rivalry between the two women remained and seemed to intensify through what was dubbed the War of the Wombs. Though Lady Ellen had not given her last husband an heir, she was able to give Waldron Tarbeck a son and 2 daughters. Lady Jane, not to be outdone, gave birth to a son named Tywin. Legend states that when Lord Gerald, the child's grandfather, ruffled the baby's golden hair, baby Tywin bit his finger. Though other children would follow for Kytos and Jane, Tywin was the only grandchild Gerald ever met. In 244 AC, Gerald died of a bad bladder, being unable to pass water. At the age of 24, Kytos Lannister, his eldest surviving son, became Warden of the West, Shield of Lannisport, and Lord of Casterly Rock. Titles he was not ready for, nor should have ever had. So I'll talk in part 5 about Kytos Lannister, and then we'll get to the good stuff, Tywin Lannister. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.